UFOs are real, but secrecy is the real threat. It's by Steve McCambly. Ella Louise Fortune, who worked as a nurse at the Mescalero Indian Reservation near Three Rivers, New Mexico, took a picture that we're looking at while driving home along Highway 54, October 16, 1957, near Holloman Air Force Base. Now, with all the recent news concerning impeachments and Amazon rainforests and whatever, despite the sudden absence of coverage on this issue, since that problem has yet to be resolved, it's indicative of our nature to focus on what is new and not on what is truly important. And another astoundingly transformative topic made its way into mainstream media earlier this year, receiving little attention now. After 7 decades of relentless denial, the U.S. military publicly acknowledged the existence of UFOs in our skies. Of course, they don't call them UFOs, they call them unidentified aerial phenomena, but they're still UFOs. And when examined contextually, this casual admission may prove to be the biggest story in the history of humankind, obviously. In May of last year, that's 2019, the New York Times and CBS reported that the U.S. Navy recently admitted that their pilots have been observing objects that defy our understanding of how things are supposed to fly. We don't have this type of technology, even though this type of technology was very clearly described in various ancient cultures, especially the Atlanteans and the Emerald Tablets, and you'll find a playlist of those videos in my video playlists. The Emerald Tablets, supposedly written by an Atlantean Thoth, who survived the catastrophe of Atlantis and became one of the first deities of ancient Egypt. He claims that he had a spacecraft for interstellar travel, that he has buried it under a sphinx in the plateau of pyramids in ancient Egypt. He doesn't tell if it's Giza or some other place, but it's under a sphinx, he said. So there are various ancient cultures that talk about space travel, air travel, and space travel, and even ETs. Now, going back to this article, the actual incidents occurred, U.S. Navy drills in 2014 and 15, both on the West Coast and the East Coast. Another confirmed encounter referred in the story involving a squadron from the USS Nimitz, which occurred 10 years earlier in 2004. This is the Tic Tac sighting, the Tic Tac encounter, where several pilots observed a small elliptical craft moving in irregular paths at speeds exceeding what was thought possible. And recently, CNN again reported that the Navy has confirmed, quote unquote, that their pilots have encountered UFOs. Is that such an earth-shattering admission? They are objects, they fly, they cannot be identified, so what? The real question is, if the Navy does not know what they are, then what are they? We as the public are left to speculate, fantasize, as we await the next morsel of information from our trusted governments and news sources. Now, many people continue to regard this as a curiosity, a preliminary chapter in a story that will end with the admission of a computer glitch, faulty radar system, or errant weather balloon. Those who have followed the history of UFO sightings undoubtedly will conclude that this is the first crack in the wall of military secrecy surrounding thousands of separate extraterrestrial spacecraft encounters that have occurred over more than 7 decades. And my comment here is that this spring the UK will be declassifying their UFO ET encounter files to the public worldwide on a uk.gov site, and the files will be on there for anyone worldwide to examine. That should be interesting, because they have the encounter of the UFO at Rendlesham Forest, which was a UK base. Now, is this proof subjective? A broad chasm between believers and deniers exists because the standards of proof on each side are not the same. On one extreme are those who require extraterrestrial beings to appear at town hall meetings before reconsidering their position. On the other are those who seek a shaky video of amorphous lights appearing in the sky and then immediately conclude that ET is here. So how then are we supposed to assess the footage taken from the viewfinders of fighter pilots? If any more credence is given to this evidence, quote unquote, it's only because of the credibility that we choose to bestow upon the source that has offered it. If we were to be purely objective, there is not anything more here beyond the stamp of validity of trusted institutions like the U.S. Navy and mainstream media. How then are we to proceed? In this day and age, any form of recorded visual evidence carries the possibility of a misdirection, and though billions of human beings have smartphones with sophisticated cameras at the ready, we must contend that the reality that photographs and videos can easily be enhanced, modified, or created from scratch to falsely prove, quote unquote, that an extraterrestrial presence exists on our planet. If we cannot rely on videos and photographs, where then should we look for proof? Unless one has had a first-hand personal encounter with a being from another star system, the most compelling evidence can only come from the testimony of actual eyewitnesses to UFOs. Could someone else's personal account offer anything more than a compelling but unsubstantiated story? That's a matter of opinion. On the other hand, eyewitness testimony, though flawed at times, is often offered as the foundation of proof in our legal system today. If witnesses can condemn a suspect of a crime or provide an alibi that leads to their exoneration, why wouldn't we consider testimony with regard to UFO phenomenon just as seriously? The military has unofficially acknowledged UFOs for years. Dr. Stephen Greer is an emergency room physician who has spent over 2 decades tirelessly compiling and spreading evidence of extraterrestrial contact with humans and the suppression of disinformation by the media and government organizations. His 2 documentaries, Unacknowledged and Serious Disclosure, Serious meaning the star Sirius, S-I-R-I-U-S, Unacknowledged and Serious Disclosure documentaries have been viewed by millions of people around the world. He's briefed members of Congress and former CIA Director James Woolsey, and in 2001 he held a conference at the National Press Club flanked by 20 retired military, FAA, and intelligence officers who all publicly attested to the presence of ETs on Earth. I mean, that is mind-boggling. Now, among the wealth of information he has made publicly available, Dr. Greer offers over 6 hours of eyewitness testimony on his disclosure website, all of which is worthy of consideration. If you have ever listened to these interviews, it's difficult to conclude them to be intentionally misleading. The witnesses are mainly ex-military, some of them having held high positions. They have very similar stories with a few key consistent elements, including a typical military deadpan delivery. Many were early in their military careers at the time of their encounter. They witnessed objects moving through the sky soundlessly at unthinkable speeds, making maneuvers that would have crushed their pilots and then abruptly vanish into as if it was an interdimensional portal. Often physical evidence of the encounters remained. Their stories are often corroborated by other eyewitnesses and even radar technicians. They claim that they were threatened by their superiors if they spoke out, so they waited for decades in many cases. Now that their military careers are long over, they find it meaningless to keep their vows of silence and wish to live out their remaining years with a clean conscience. There is, of course, the possibility that they are lying, but what would be their motive? They are not gaining fame or fortune for their candor. Most of them are unwilling to state that what they saw was from another planet or star system. They simply know that things just don't move like that, at least not anything from around here anyway. So how could we choose to interpret these accounts, and more recently those of the F-18 pilots in the New York Times and on CNN, depends on your perspective and how flexible you are in your belief system. Here I would like to explore the middle ground. If you believe they are telling the truth, and you also believe that extraterrestrial craft are an absurd fantasy perpetuated by a pocket of our popular of our population that is tired of acceding to Einstein's special theory of relativity, which dictates that warp speeds are a physical impossibility, it can only lead you to the following conclusion. The objects we saw are real, and they are from here. In other words, secret military aircraft would explain most, if not all, of the incredible stories told by people who seem utterly convinced of their experience and continue to remain undeterred in their account despite continuous attacks from debunkers and dismissal from every real media source. And before I go on with this, I just want to mention the fact that there is a nice documentary on YouTube by Manly P. Hall explaining what he thinks these UFOs and ETs are, these humanoids, and he believes that they could be the remnants of the Atlanteans that are still among us on Earth. They could be our ancient ancestors. That, as Thoth the Atlantean wrote in the Emerald Tablets, some of them did escape the catastrophe of the sinking of the lost continent of Atlantis, and they took with them their knowledge, their advanced technology, and they went to various other parts of the world and reestablished cities with their high technology, and even built pyramids in these cities. And we find these pyramids all over the world, of course, not just in Egypt. Now, going back to this, in recent years, the government of the United States has been spending around 700 trillion, yes, per year, according to a source here. Every once in a while we get a glimpse, 700 billion, sorry. I'm counting the zero, 700 billion a year. Every once in a while we get a glimpse of what some of this money is paying for when never before seen radar, invisible, futuristic looking flying machines capable of classified speeds and unconfirmed altitudes that are made from obscure materials are rolled out of hangars with a modicum of fanfare. It's not unreasonable to assume that we have others out there being tested and tweaked. Flight testing is a necessary part of developing cycle of new technology, and could explain why many of these many UFO sightings. It would also explain why the military has been so conspicuously tight-lipped about the whole thing. Why jump to the fantasy of ancient interstellar civilizations that have found a way to crack the cosmic speed limit when everything could be neatly explained by super-classified military flying machines running test flights? The secret airship theory certainly ties up many of those loose ends while not forcing us to discredit the earnest testimony of many eyewitnesses of unexplained aerial phenomena from our brothers and sisters in uniform. It does, however, introduce a new wrinkle in our understanding of the current state. If there are secret aircraft, from whom are they being kept a secret? A brief history of secrecy? We may be quick to conclude that secrecy is a necessary part of modern warfare, and that having weapons technology up our sleeve endows us with tactical advantage over our adversaries. Upon closer consideration, this military strategy has implications that are potentially very troubling. To better explain, let's consider the advantage of secret weapons technology historically. In the closing months of World War II, it became increasingly apparent that the Empire of Japan had little intention of surrendering to the Allied forces despite their continued heavy losses of life. Emperor Hirohito and propagandists worked the Japanese public into a frenzy through synergistic narratives of nationalism, honor, and fear, the introduction of kamikaze pilots, young warriors of sound minds, flying their propelled-driven planes directly into American ships, gave the world a startling glimpse into the depths of Japan's resolve. The United States has something up their sleeve as well, though. The possibility of harnessing the power of atomic fission through a chain reaction had been stirring in the minds of theoretical physicists long before the start of the war. The idea of turning this potential force of nature into a weapon came soon afterwards. The Manhattan Project, the secret effort of the U.S. military to build the atomic bomb, did not take place in an isolated desert located in Los Alamos alone. It was an enormous feat of science and engineering that required participation from not only theoretical physicists, but engineers, mathematicians, material scientists, construction contractors, and laborers Thousands played a role in their efforts were distributed around the country, from New Mexico to Tennessee. To put it into perspective, the atomic bomb was not constructed only from stuff sitting around. The element plutonium was synthesized by bombarding uranium with neutron radiation and isolating the products. And prior to the Manhattan Project, plutonium was a substance that had not existed beyond extremely trace quantities on our planet. None of the public and very few of those involved with its production knew what the purpose of all of this activity was really all about. Even the Vice President at the time, Harry Truman, was unaware of this effort that was taking place, and he took an oath of office April 12th, 1945, and was only then briefed about the extent and implications of the Manhattan Project. If coordinated correctly, an awful lot of smart people can be kept in the dark about a lot of things, including their own role in a bigger picture. Now, going into the secrecy is the real threat. President Truman's reasoning has been the subject of such much scrutiny and debate, regardless of one's critique of his rationale. Obvious that the use of a weapon as a deterrent is only possible if the enemy is aware that it exists. One can argue that this has been proven, as no nuclear weapon has ever been deployed on humans in 74 years since the Nagasaki event. What then is the intent of new kinds of weapons and technology that are hidden? Secret weapons cannot be deterrents against aggressive action. Weapons that remain hidden in secrecy are necessarily offensive. Moreover, secret weapons can serve as a more diabolical purpose than the damage they inflict. If no one knows their damage signature, range, or how they are deployed, they can potentially be used to synthesize conflict and implicate innocent parties. How would anyone be certain of the source of the aggression? Secret weapons do not exist to prevent wars, they exist to start them. Now, the atomic bomb was kept a secret for 3 weeks, little else had been offered to the public since, and it would be naive to assume that no newsworthy progress has been made in technology beyond supersonic airplanes and miniaturized thermonuclear devices and self-guided drones. Now, depending on which sources we trust, there have been dozens of staged events, and now whether or not to consider a discussion around UFOs and extraterrestrials to be flippant, the recent attention media has placed on phenomena like this offers an opportunity to consider the depth and implications of secrecy more soberly. Perhaps the U.S. Navy offered up this footage 15 years after the actual incident of the Tic Tac sighting to be forthcoming. And regardless of their intent, it's important to put this admission into context. Have these been the only sightings since 2004? Is it reasonable to assume that this recent disclosure reflects a spirit of transparency, or have there been numerous other acknowledged encounters with UFOs, as the unofficial testimonies indicate? If these objects reported by the Navy are not of extraterrestrial origin, we must avail ourselves to the reality that weapons and crafts of spectacular capability are hidden not just from our quote-unquote adversaries, but from all of us. In either case, it's clear that despite the tepid public reaction to this Navy report, it's offered us a rare glimpse of the depth and breadth of secrecy that has been imposed on us, if we're willing to pay attention. This wall of secrecy does not merely hide a few irrelevant facts. It may very well be an all-encompassing distortion field, quote-unquote, that has perpetuated a vastly different interpretation of global events while squelching a potential transcendent truth about our history and our role in a greater cosmic neighborhood. This article, UFOs Are Real But Secrecy is a Real Threat, originally created and published by Madhava Sethi, MD, for Collective Evolution, published here under Creative Commons license on Creative Spark by Steve McCambley. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.